Once the Agenda 2030 was approved and endorsed by all the countries of the world, one of the first questions that countries started facing in the reality and the practicality of actually implementing this agenda at the national level was, what is our readiness to actually implement the SDGs? And within this, and thinking about the three principles that the SDGs have: universality, integrality, and leaving no one behind, the national planning processes had a long experience that have worked in terms of actually identifying which are the populations, groups that need the support, and so on and so forth. A different issue is the question of integrality. So, and that was a major question that countries which approached us was, well, how do we really incorporate an integrality? How do we really incorporate an idea of an agenda that needs to be looked at as a whole, instead of, taking section by section, SDG by SDG, even target by target, and giving it to one particular sector to solve, right? So that's thinking about responding to that need. We developed this tool, the Rapid Integrated Assessment. Now, what does this tool do? It's actually quite simple. You look at the whole ecosystem, to put it in the ecosystem of planning instruments, which goes from your long-term vision to your mid-term national development plan, which usually is pretty much aligned to the length of an administration of a particular country, to the sectoral and local level plans. And you think, well, how are the SDGs, the targets themselves, the scope and the ambition of these targets reflected within the national planning system? This is not looking for a verbatim identification of the words of target 1.1 or target 13.2, but it is, let's look at the ambition and scope of the SDG targets and see whether within this plethora of planning documents you can identify the actions and interventions that would actually fulfill the scope and ambition of this target. So one example, if we look at target 1.1, which calls for the eradication of extreme poverty, is the country actually looking at the eradication of extreme poverty at any time frame from now to 2030, or is actually looking at reduction of extreme poverty by an X percentage? In that case, you would have the scope, but not the same level of ambition. Similarly, you might have countries which are simply not considering certain aspects that would be relevant for actually having the entire agenda incorporated. And there are certain targets, and this is an important, you need to evaluate which are the targets from these 169 targets that are actually relevant for the country per se. There are even some SDG targets that are actually thought of to address issues of international multilateral organization governance and some other issues. So your baseline is not 169 targets, the ones that you want to see reflected, but is usually a subset, 120, 115, whatever, some number of that such. The second question that we're addressing is whether your institutionality is actually delivering in a multi-sectoral way. So who are the responsible institutions for achieving a particular SDG target or an SDG goal as a whole? Because you might have a target identified within your national planning process that actually covers the scope and the ambition. But the reality is that to get there, you need a collaboration of multiple sectors. And if you have a strictly sectoral approach which is what most countries have, a strictly sectoral approach for the delivery of health, for the social protection actions, for education, then you're missing on the idea of using this agenda as a multi-dimensional thinking framework, which would allow you to move one particular target and move along the rest through a channel of interventions. And the RIA is not presenting you with the solutions to that particular aspect, but it tells you where you are. It tells you what's the starting point for you as a country. How many of the SDGs are actually reflected in your planning processes? What's the status of your institutionality in terms of whether you are looking at implementation through a sectoral lens or you're looking at implementation through a multi-sectoral lens? And that is in a nutshell what the RIA